Hello, everyone, depending on where you are, good morning or good afternoon. I just want to say welcome to our live webinar here for Glanbia Nutritionals on microgenerations in the time of COVID-19 and how each microgeneration is responding to this global pandemic. We will begin here shortly. I'll start off with a few kind of lead-in slides to give any stragglers a minute to kind of register and log in. We know that this is kind of a unique situation having the conference online. So we'll start off with a couple housekeeping things here. There we go. So in case you are unaware, I'm not sure how your screens are set up right now, but you do have the ability to kind of drag and resize that screen. So if my beautiful face is a little bit too big for you, you can minimize that and make sure that you can get all of this good content that we're going to be showing you here. In the GoToWebinar screen that shows up, you also have the option then to ask questions. We did reserve a few minutes at the end of our webinar to answer any of those questions that you might have. In order to submit a question, there's a little questions tab. Just open that tab in that sidebar that you have and enter that question where it says enter question for staff. That'll get sent to me. You can do that anytime throughout the webinar. And then I'll, at the end, go through and answer as many of those questions as I'm able, if time allows. We do want to let you know that the webinar is being recorded today. A link will be sent out to everyone who registered for today's webinar. After that, there will be an email with a link to the recording. We'll also be posting this at a further date on our website at glanbianutritionals.com. So that's always an option that you can access it there as well. And just a little plug for our mega trends as well. If you didn't attend our webinar in early May, we gave a webinar on our mega trends guide as well for 2020. That guide, the webinar recording, as well as an infographic on our mega trends are all available at our website as well. So feel free, if you didn't attend the webinar, or if you did and you need that guide or even the mega trends infographic, just click on that link or go to glanbianutritionals.com. You can access those. I just wanted to take the time to introduce myself as well. My name is Emily Hallock. I'm the primary research manager here at Glanbia Nutritionals. I have actually been kind of a key proponent here of making sure that we are running our COVID-19 consumer tracker survey, and then I pull all of that data and create reports. Also created the deck that we're going to go through today. So definitely the person to ask any questions of and keep track of those questions for you. With that, we will kick it off. I see that we did get a few stragglers with my kind of lead in and introduction there. So what I want to do is I first want to give you some background on our COVID-19 consumer tracking survey. We're kind of giving you the why here. Early on, in the US's experience with COVID-19, Glanbia Nutritionals identified that need to begin tracking consumer behavior in order to understand the changes that consumers were making due to the virus. That's not only for activities like grocery shopping, which I'm sure that you're seeing a lot of, or restaurant usage, another category that everyone is talking about, but also things like VMS consumption or exercise frequency, or even just general product purchases and product consumption. We started our tracking survey on March 23rd. We've repeated this survey then kind of on a bi-weekly basis for the past 16 weeks. And what you're seeing is data presented to you representing weeks 1, 6, and 12. That's the weeks that we chose were chosen because they're representing kind of a broad snapshot, as well as representing some key points that are kind of along the timeline, the pandemic timeline, if you will. Week 1, you'll see this kind of in the upper right-hand corner there of all of our slides. But week 1 was we termed it the panic buying week, just before a lot of the large cities issued their stay-at-home orders. Week 6 was kind of near the end of the stay-at-home orders, where we saw the reopening of a few of the states after the stay-at-home orders. And then week 12 we saw the start of these nationwide protests in the name of racial equality. So there's definitely some other things impacting some of this data. It's not just COVID-19 when you get to week 12, but it's definitely some key points throughout the timeline there. Now, for this biweekly survey, we survey approximately 400 consumers, and those 400 consumers, within them, we control for quotas on gender, geography, ethnicity, and those are all based on census data. But then we create custom quotas for ages to ensure that we have kind of usable base sizes for our microgenerational data. Speaking of microgenerations, if you attended our Megatrend webinar, this will look pretty familiar to you. But this is our microgeneration spectrum. So we'll break that down here just a little bit in a more granular fashion for you. We've identified that microgenerations are one of our megatrends, and it's one of our first megatrends because we utilize them to better understand each of our megatrends that then follow. So here you see a short summary of each megatrend or each microgeneration in terms of kind of our rationale behind their decision making. So we see the leading boomers are at an age where their decisions kind of revolve around that healthy aging concept. Neo boomers are still young enough to think, in terms of pro-aging. So what can they do now to prevent a lot of those complications that are associated with getting older? We see Gen XS, they're focused on kind of regaining a healthy lifestyle after coming out of that convenience phase of life that plagues the Gen Znos. And Gen Znos, are mainly focused on that convenience lifestyle that's driven by that hectic, busy lifestyle, generally with, children, young children at that in the home. Pro-millennials are the first microgeneration that come of age where the population in the US was just inherently diverse, while those mid-millennials, just after the pro-millennials, experienced kind of an innately global lifestyle. Everything is within reach at the click of a button. And then Z Tribe are just getting old enough to make their own choices when it comes to maybe spending their own money, while Z Alpha, they're the youngest of the bunch, are still having choices made for them, or at some points aren't even born yet. So for this presentation, we're using our microgenerations in a little bit of a different way, and we're using them to understand the different ways in which each microgeneration has responded and then will respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. As I mentioned before, we wanted to make sure that we had usable base sizes for our microgenerations. So in terms of base size, we aim for a quota of 50 consumers per microgeneration, with the millennial microgenerations at a quota of 40 because we do divide millennials into 3 microgenerations. Obviously, we don't survey the whole of Generation Z. Z Alpha is only 10 years old at this point at the oldest. So we have an age group of 18 to 20-year-old respondents who make up our Z Tribe sample. So as we go through this, you'll see that Z Tribe is the only microgeneration shown for the Gen Z generation. And with that, we'll start off with the way in which consumers are actually performing their grocery shopping. Essentially, we ask them, how was your shopping done? And in week 1, I don't think it's a surprise, the majority of consumers and of each microgeneration are visiting the store in person to purchase their groceries. In fact, that actually remains consistent for week 6 and 12 as well as the primary way in which people are grocery shopping. But by looking to the secondary way in which consumers are grocery shopping, we see the impact of COVID-19 and then those differences between the microgenerations. In week 1, we see buy online and pick up in store. That's, we call that click and collect, was the second leading way in which consumers shop for groceries. And that was particularly true for those mid microgenerations like the Gen Znos and the Pro and the mid millennials. Leading boomers, however, are the only microgeneration whose second most popular way of purchasing groceries in week 1 was the delivery model. So they're buying online and then having delivered to their home. In week 6, that's nearing the end of the stay-at-home orders, we see click and collect become more pervasive. So that's drawing in microgenerations that maybe not were previously heavy users, like the neo boomers and the Gen XS. However, week 6, we still see leading boomers to be the heaviest users of grocery delivery, with that usage actually increasing 12 points from week 1 to week 6, as you see there, that red highlight circle. Now, week 12 just might be the most interesting yet, as this is the week where we see the leading boomers switch over to a click and collect option from delivery. And then we see neo-boomers and nouveau millennials actually switch to delivery from click and collect. It's kind of interesting to see the changes here. You know, maybe we had some assumptions made that perhaps younger generations were relying more on a delivery model than older generations. But like we see here, those leading boomers, which are the oldest microgeneration that we evaluate, are actually the largest proponents in the beginning of the delivery model, and now are kind of moving to a click and collect model. Next, we wanted to understand what type of products consumers are purchasing week by week, and we're showing weeks 1, 6, and 12 here again. We provided a fairly comprehensive list of food and drink items ranging from just the most basic of staples to the more specific products like vitamin and mineral supplements, or even ready-to-drink protein beverages. And then we asked them to select which of those they've purchased within the past week. I would say, unsurprisingly, in week 1, we see staple categories like milk, bread, snacks, fresh meat, fresh produce, cheese, and then even things like bottled water topping the list in terms of the top 3 or top 4 products purchased within the past week. And that's with older microgenerations more likely to be purchasing healthier products like fresh produce, while those younger microgenerations are more likely to be kind of indulging in snacks and cheese perhaps, or stocking up in snacks and cheese for those stay-at-home orders. In week 6, we see kind of a slight reshuffling of the same staple product categories. However, we do see snacks and meat rising in importance pretty much across the board here. So this is week 6. People are, still in these stay-at-home orders, maybe just coming out of it, and they're kind of restocking those snacks and fresh meat products at home. And then in week 12, we see, and this is, keep in mind, as the states are reopening and restrictions are being lifted, we see an overall increase in the percentage of consumers who are purchasing each type of product. Makes sense. They feel a little more free to go out to the grocery store and be purchasing things on a more regular basis. But we see a decrease in importance on unhealthy snacks and an increased importance on those healthier options again, like milk and fresh produce. Not to say that they weren't purchasing them throughout their stay-at-home orders, but perhaps now they've realized they need to get back on track with a healthier diet. So clearly what we just saw, I don't think was surprising for anyone. Consumers pretty much focus on purchasing staple goods when shopping for groceries, but we wanted to get a better view and understanding of what type of functional and fortified products consumers are buying and how that's changed over the past 12 weeks. So we pulled the top 3, maybe sometimes 4 functional fortified products that consumers are purchasing by microgeneration. In week 1, we see VMS, that's vitamin and mineral supplements, in the top 3 products purchased for almost every microgeneration. Sports drinks comes in number 2 overall, but sports drinks is actually in the top 3 products purchased for every microgeneration. We see energy drinks 3rd overall, but clearly are kind of more important for those younger generations. You see them skewing a little bit higher in terms of purchases. And protein bars are kind of reaching both ends of the spectrum with a slightly higher purchase penetration for those younger nouveau millennials and Z tribe. But obviously leading boomers, neo boomers, and Gen XS still comes in at number 3 in terms of fortified and functional products purchased in the past week. In week 6, we're seeing VMS kind of gain importance, particularly for the younger microgenerations where maybe it wasn't a priority in week 1. We're seeing sports drinks again come in at number 2 overall with fairly consistent purchases across the board. And then energy drinks again are coming in 3rd. Protein bars, it seems, kind of increased in importance in terms of purchases for week 6 versus week 1. And we also see a newcomer to the top functional and fortified product purchases, which are protein snacks for Z tribe. So perhaps they've already identified they like snacking, they want to continue snacking, but maybe they need a healthier snack option and they're looking towards that fortified functional protein snacks to deliver that for them. Now in week 12, again, we see VMS gain importance in terms of purchase penetration with sports drinks, energy drinks, and protein bars, again, rounding out the top 4. However, week 12 is now the first time that we see ready-to-drink protein shakes enter the top 3 for any microgeneration, and that's with almost a quarter of neo-boomers purchasing protein RTDs in the past week. So that came on pretty strong. You know, previously in week 6, we're seeing 11% for that third category of protein bars for neo-boomers, and now we're at 23% of neo-boomers purchasing protein RTDs in week 12. Now, obviously, we just saw that VMS saw and will continue to see week over week increases in terms of purchases and importance to consumers. So we dug even deeper in our survey to understand how many consumers are currently consuming VMS and then for what benefits they're taking VMS for. So first off, we have consumption penetration for weeks 1, 6, and 12, and that's by microgeneration, and then we have our total on the left-hand side there as well. In essence, I like to say, if you're a leading boomer who wasn't taking VMS before COVID-19 hit, you definitely are now. In our survey, we then followed this question by asking what benefits they're taking those VMS for. And in week 1, we see general health was pretty much top of mind for nearly every microgeneration. Second was immune system support, and I would say rightly so, given the current pandemic situation. We see bone health, heart health, brain or cognitive support, sleep support, and even beauty and skincare as kind of secondary benefits of importance in week 1, but that's heavily dependent on the microgeneration. Now in week 6, we see general health increase in importance quite drastically versus week 1, kind of maintains that number 1 spot. We also see immune system support increase significantly in importance, and that's particularly for the older microgenerations like the leading boomers, the neo-boomers, and the Gen XS. Heart health remains pretty important for older consumers, while interestingly enough, digestive health makes an important appearance for millennial microgenerations there. Z-Tribe remains really the only microgeneration where benefits like beauty and skincare or brain and cognitive health are in the top 3 or the top 4 for week 6. In week 12, we again see a rise in consumer importance of general health across the board, but surprisingly, immune system support drops out of the top 3 for many microgenerations. So whether that's due to a belief that by this time the COVID-19 virus is under control, or consumers believe that an increased focus on general health will generally improve their immune system function is unclear. You know, we didn't ask that open-end in our survey, but we do see an increased prevalence of taking VMS to support specific health functions like bone health or digestive support or heart health or sleep support or brain and cognitive support, or for those younger microgenerations, prenatal care and joint health. Now, I do want to point out and keep in mind that especially for Gen Z, those are fairly small percentages. There's fairly small percentages that are taking for these specific health benefits, but that makes sense. They're young consumers. They're not extremely worried about almost any of these things right now. And so if they are taking them, they're taking them kind of either on a not regular basis, or there's a small portion of the population in Gen Z that is taking vitamin and mineral supplements on a regular basis. So it's great to know that consumers are increasing their usage of VMS in an attempt to maybe stay healthy during a global pandemic, obviously, but what does that mean for the future of VMS? So we asked consumers how they expect their VMS usage to change once life returns kind of back to normal. And 79% said they expect their VMS usage to stay the same as it is now during the pandemic, meaning any increase that is due to this COVID-19 pandemic will remain consistent in terms of VMS consumption in the future. So in a nutshell, this kind of pandemic experience has shown consumers the important role that VMS can play in maintaining or bettering their health. And that support isn't something that they're willing to just give up overnight. Beyond VMS, we also wanted to know how COVID is affecting consumers' other activities that maybe support their health. And I think the most obvious of that is their exercise frequency. So we asked consumers how many days per week they exercised or worked out before COVID-19, and then after. So we gave them options of none, less than 1, 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6 days a week, every day, or 2+ times per day. So then we asked how many days per week are you exercising or working out now, and then we cut that data by microgeneration. So interestingly enough, these leading boomers present a pretty nice bell curve of exercise frequency with relatively little variation between, pre-COVID frequency and now. Neo-boomers are having the highest rates of those who didn't exercise pre-COVID, but have the highest rates also of those working out multiple times per day pre-COVID and now. So that's of any microgeneration. Obviously, we're seeing leading boomers. There's no one saying they're doing, 2-a-day workouts. Gen XS represents a moderately active population, I would say, with the largest increase in consumers who have actually reduced their activity level to 0 from pre-COVID to now. And Gen Zenos have clearly been impacted in their ability to work out routinely. And I like to think that's most likely due to them having kids at home all the time now. I mean, schooling at home, and now summer activities and programs have been canceled. That's taking up a lot of their time. And the same goes for those pro-millennials who most likely have young children at home as well. Mid-millennials, it seems, have actually increased their exercise frequency in the midst of a global pandemic. Perhaps that's due to more time on their hands if they were furloughed or laid off from jobs. And Nouveau Millennials and Z Tribe, quite similarly, have both seen slight increases in those not exercising, but also in those exercising more frequently. So kind of going from that, middle of the chart here to each end of the spectrum. So all data up to this point, if you remember, I said is from weeks 1, 6, and 12 of our survey, meaning where the data ends is when most states were kind of still early on in their phased reopenings. Now, this is slightly more recent data from our week 14 of our survey, and that shows the majority of consumers that are now combating against the ill effects of this kind of reduced activity that we saw on the previous slide during these stay-at-home orders. So they're actively trying to better their body composition. We've broken out this by microgeneration as well, and you can see that those very young microgenerations are the ones that are most severely over-indexing on these attempts, like Z Tribe with 71% saying that they're actively trying to better their body composition, and that is a current statistic. Now, you might be wondering how these consumers are trying to better their body composition, and we did actually ask that question in our survey as well. Essentially, what they're doing is participating in cardio exercise, maybe going for a walk, going for a run. They're controlling how much they're eating. And then for younger microgenerations, working in some weightlifting and then using meal replacement products as well. Essentially, what we're saying here is that consumers who relaxed participation in exercise and workout activities, perhaps during these stay-at-home orders, are, they're ready to get back on track and, kind of work on that body composition and activity level. But when do they expect, or when do consumers expect that it will be safe to maybe resume normal activities if it were? Lucky for you, we asked that question in our survey as well. This isn't broken out by microgeneration, but we did look into that as well. But as we move forward through this kind of pandemic experience, I guess, consumers are becoming just less optimistic that life is going to return to normal anytime soon. Response started out pretty strong in week 8, with the majority of consumers kind of expecting to resume normal activities and maybe in the next few months or by the end of 2020. But obviously by week 14, we're seeing more than a quarter of consumers that are now expecting the light at the end of the tunnel to be the new year at the earliest. A pretty severe increase there in the number of consumers saying never as well. Maybe they're thinking this is going to have far-reaching implications basically from here on out. Older microgenerations like leading and neo-boomers are the kind of most conservative with their estimates, even from the beginning, while younger microgenerations, particularly those nouveau and mid-millennials, still believe that normal life might possibly resume in the next few weeks or months. But clearly, I think with the changing circumstances, you know, changing by the day at this point, clearly only time will tell. Now that's all that I have for you today on how microgenerations are responding to COVID-19. I hope that this discussion has maybe provided some actionable insights for you to work with. As I said, we are continuing to perform an update of this research on a bi-weekly basis. So please reach out, you know, if you'd like to get a better understanding of how COVID-19 is impacting the consumer experience specific to your business, and understanding that by generation or microgeneration as well. I would like to take a few minutes here just to answer any questions that you might have. So feel free, like I said, to send those in using the chat box in that GoToWebinar pane that you have on your screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open that up and see if we've got any questions that came in throughout our, here we go, throughout our conversation. Okay, let's see here. We've got one that asks, you know, can we expect this trend of bettering body composition, which you could equate to weight loss, I guess you would say, but is this trend of bettering body composition going to continue to increase? You know, because we're obviously seeing an increase in that right now. I would say yes, especially in the near future, kind of until respondents can get back on track. If they can, you know, get back to that baseline, I would say. Now, that might be further interrupted by any more shutdowns, any other stay-at-home orders, as we kind of see cases in the United States on that exponential upwards curve. So we might kind of go through another round of people, you know, staying at home and reducing activity, kind of resorting back to comfort foods and snacks. But then I would expect to see the same kind of increase, you know, at the end of those stay-at-home orders or anything like that, as people kind of resume normal activity and wanting to better that body composition. So, you know, it's almost a curve up to baseline, and once they recover back to baseline, then I expect that to steady out. Here we go. Let's see. One question just asking why microgenerations, you know, why not just focus on a generational breakout? And that's a great question. Essentially what we believe is that generations as they stand are covering about 20 years in a time span, sometimes more. Technology and lifestyles at this point in our lives are changing so rapidly, and they're changing at a much faster pace than they were maybe 20 or even 10 years ago. So we need to take that into account. You know, we need to make sure that we're accounting for the fact of these rapidly changing lifestyles, and that when people are coming of age, they're being affected by different things happening out in the world and technology as well. And that's why we think microgenerations are so important, because you know, someone that comes of age, came of age 10 years ago is having a very different experience than those consumers who are coming of age today. And so microgenerations allow us to take that broader generation and kind of divide that down into smaller subsegments of the consumer population to really get those nuances in how they respond and react to basically everything that's happening out there in the world. It can have a very, very impactful difference on how they respond to marketing messages, how they prefer to be communicated with, or how to reach them as well in terms of maybe marketing a product or communicating with them in education. So we think microgenerations are pretty important in that aspect. And then you can also use microgenerations to view almost all of our mega trends then through microgenerations. And we've given you a pretty great example of that today, where we all just by asking our age question in a different way on our survey, we're able to then evaluate every question in our survey by microgeneration. And so essentially what we've shown you here today is just a small subset of the questions that we ask on a biweekly basis in our COVID consumer tracker. So I hope that's been helpful. I realize that we are just at time. So if you do have any further questions, or if it wasn't able to be answered, please just shoot. You can either email them to me or email them, send them in through the Glanbia Nutritionals website as well. And if you want to follow up and hear a little bit more about our COVID microgenerational breakout and data, we'd be more than happy to do so. I hope you all have a great rest of the day and a good rest of the IFT conference. Thanks so much.